We got recently the chance to play and enjoy a very nice party game which is called Detective Club. It is a very simple to teach and yet highly enjoyable party game that can service from 4 to 8 players. It can be taught in a snap. It is very easy, very easy to be explained. It has tremendous production value and quality in the production, in my opinion, and it has a ton of cards, big size cards I would say, that have this composite imagination and depiction of different things, that from one card you can identify different details and then use them in order to give hints to your players to play the game. But what are you trying to do in this game? It's called Detective Club because you'll play a number of rounds, and in each round one player will be the active player. They're going to try to open with a card. They think a word, let's say nature. They open with a card, trying to show something, select something from the 6 cards that they have in their hand that shows something with an element that resembles nature or can remind nature to some people. And then he will give or she will give roles. They will write on the notepad the keyword and spread it to all the players. They all have their own notepad facing down, but only one player will not get a keyword, and they are the conspirator. So what the active player is trying to do is they're trying to win points together with the conspirator by confusing the detectives and having the detectives voting each other instead of the conspirator at the voting phase at the end, because the essence of the game is everyone is putting one card down, and then we follow with a second step of putting a second card down. But of course the conspirator doesn't have a clue on what cards to put, because they don't know the keyword, so they're trying to guess from what they see in front of them on the table. A very simple idea, a very robust idea yet. It reminds me in a way of Spyfall, but I think it's done in a very different way. This is a more game than Spyfall. Not that Spyfall is not joyful, it's very fun and party game, but it's very on the fly and quick. Here you have to selectively put cards that bring you memories from, I would say, Mysterium, Dixit, When I Dream and stuff like that, which is some of my favorite party games out there. But this is done in a very slick, fast, robust way. So, no more me talking, join me at the table, I'll show you how the game plays, and after the explanation of the rules, we'll come back with a final wrap-up with our first impressions about the games that we played and our first opinion of Detective Club. So let's see how we play Detective Club. First of all, let's familiarize ourselves with the components. We have 168 evidence cards. These are these nice, huge linen finish cards with this back and beautiful art, immersive, with a lot of fantasy and imagination. And there is a huge pile of them, as you can see, for lots and lots of replayability. We also have 58 victory point tokens. These tokens are in denominations of 3, 4 and 5 that you can keep hidden during the course of the game. Then you also have the voting tokens and the player markers in their colors respectively. This one holds areas for the first card and the second evidence card, and this is the voting token. We will also have notebooks and a pencil in the game for each player. There is a notebook, and the pencil actually that comes inside the box acts as a first player token as well. So let's see how we set up the game. First of all, the game comes in this tin metal box, which is gorgeous, by the way. Also the art is really nice on the cover, besides the cards themselves. So the first thing that we do is we place the VP tokens and the evidence cards where players can comfortably reach them. I have used some containers to have the denominations of 3, 4 and 5. Again, all 3 denominations have the same back, which is a magnifying glass. This is a huge deck of evidence cards, as you will see, and there is a ton of variety in the replayability. And I mean, I've done the unboxing video and I've commented a lot on these cards and shown them all, but just a quick scan to show you all these opportunities and these beautiful cards packed in this huge deck. And also they're quite big as well, as you can see, they're big cards. I have to admit, these are among the best I've seen throughout all of these let's say, style of games that they use cards with more than one meaning that we have seen outside in the market. So each player takes the player marker of his choice and places a voting token on the matching color on it. So for example, the red, the blue, etc. And the game comes with, I have set up the game for 4 players, but you can see that you have additional material for more players. This game plays up to 8 people, from 4 to 8, that is. Then we randomly choose the first player. That player receives the pen, which is the active player marker, and takes 1 notebook. For each other player in the game, for instance, in a 7-player game, he will take in front of you, as the active player, 6 notebooks. That means that you have your notebook so that you can use it throughout the game, but when you are the active player, you will not use your notebook, okay? You'll keep it behind your marker, but you will collect 1, 2, 3 for the 4-player game, so you'll have all the player number count minus 1 collected in front of you, ready for you to write things on. Each player then draws 6 evidence cards from the deck, as you can see here, and we are ready to play. This is a setup again for 4 players, the minimum player count. How do you play the game? A game of Detective Club plays in several rounds. On each round, players will play 2 cards, and the game ends after each player has been active player once, when we play from 6 to 8 players, or twice when we play with less than 6 players. On each round, we play the following steps, and this is very, very simple, but there's a lot of beauty in the gameplay which arises from the confusion of the conspirator. So in each round we have an active player, and we go through these 5 steps. First, the active player looks at first of all, I've said he or she has collected the notebooks from all of the players in front of him or her, but ignoring their own notebook. Then we have the choose a word step, which is the first one. The active player looks at his cards. This is the hand for each of the players, just facing down. Look at their cards and comes up with a word, keeping in mind that he will be able to use 2 cards from his hand to describe the word to the best of their ability. Then he places 1 card face up in the middle of the table. That card is supposed to reflect the word that he has in mind, and he then immediately draws a new card from the deck. Note that throughout the course of the game, whenever a player plays an evidence card, they immediately draw a new card to replace it, and each player must always have 6 evidence cards in hand. For example, let's say this player Mike over here is the active player, and he wants to play a card that matches the word that he thought, which is nature. He places the card displaying what he has selected, which is this one. So let me move this to the side for the moment. In the middle of the table, I'm just going to put it close to him because it's easier for everything to fit in the screen at the moment. But he is placing his first card on the slot 1. He has thought the word nature. He was inspired from his hand of 6 cards, so he selected one without revealing the word, and he sets the card there. Then we move to the second step, which is assigning roles. The active player writes the word on each notebook except from one, and then he shuffles all notebooks randomly, giving 1 notebook to each other player. Therefore, what happens here is, remember, I have collected as an active player 3 notebooks. I write nature in one, nature in the second one, and nothing on the third one. And then I shuffle them. And what I do is I randomly give 1 face down to each other player. So I would give 1 to this player, 1 to that player, and 1 to that player. 1 player will receive an empty notebook, and he will be the conspirator. The other players which received the notebook with the nature keyword indicated, selected, thought from the active player and written down, will be the detectives. So only 1 out of the players will be the conspirator. The other players are the detectives, and the detectives try to identify the conspirator, and the conspirator must team up with the active player in order to try to mislead the detectives. Players must keep the notebook secret at all times, and no one can know who the conspirator is except himself. So not even the active player, because they have randomly given a notebook face down to each of the players. So they don't know who is the conspirator, because they don't know out of those three who didn't receive the keyword written and has a blank notebook. Then we move to the third step, which is play cards. So I'm going to put this for the moment back to make some space for the cards. And then we move to the play card step. We're starting with the player that sits on the left of the active player. That's this player. Supposedly the pencil is here, so this player is the active player. Starting with the player sitting on the left of the active player and proceeding clockwise, each player plays one card from their hand, and again that card is supposed to match the word that the active player wrote on the notebook, and for which only two of the three detectives here have confirmation on their notebook without saying it. Again, we have to be careful not to give out any clues. So for example, let's say that here Bill is a detective. He can see that Mike wrote nature in his notebook because it's written here. He was one of the detectives. He didn't get a blank notebook. Therefore, he plays a card that displays supposedly C. He has selected this card, which has C, and it is close to the nature that he has seen written in his notebook. And he sets this card on the slot number 1. Then, for example, maybe James here plays another card. It has this beautiful nature landscape. Again, they are not the conspirator. They have been given a notebook which says nature, the keyword that the active player has conceived, and they place this card thinking of nature. And maybe, for example, this player is a conspirator. They have not received the keyword. Their notebook is blank. It does not say nature. So they're trying to understand what the keyword is from what they have seen so far, and to the best of their ability, they're playing a card without having all this info on their hand. So they just play this card for the moment. While the active player plays cards on the middle of the table. In theory, this is more to the middle. All the other players play their cards in front of them in the slots. And of course, if you're a detective, make sure to play solid evidence cards to avoid being accused during the voting phase. And if you're the conspirator, try to gather information from the cards played by the other players. So this goes around the table for then the active player will play their second card, trying to match their keyword. Of course, they have they always, and that I haven't shown so far, whenever you play a card, you have to draw back, okay? So all of these players, when they play their first card, they have to draw back so that they have 6 at their hand in any given time, okay? And now that the active player played their second card, again, they draw back so that they have in total 6, okay? Then, let's say, this player plays their second card, something with nature. Again, they were the detectives. And let's say that this player plays also this nice card which has a big wave. Again, can be considered as a hint for nature, and they know it because they have it written on their notebook. But for example, this player, maybe they are identifying some things. Maybe they think it's nature and maybe they have something, or maybe they are misled. So they try to do their best from reading out the table in front of them. Then we move to the fourth step, which is discuss and vote. After all players have played 2 cards, as you can see in front of them, including the active player, the active player says the word that was written. So he will announce nature was the keyword that I have written. He then explains the reasons why he chose the 2 cards and that he plays to reflect that word. So for example, he can say, I selected nature because you can see here we have a big sea landscape with a bottle, and there is also a rose in there, which is an element of the nature we can see in the wild nature, etc., in bushes. And also I use this one because we're in the forest, which is nature, and there's a snake, etc., etc., and tree branches as such. All other players do the same, proceeding clockwise and moving to the second player, the third and the fourth, following clockwise order. And all the players, since they do the same, And once they have explained their choices and the reasons, they may vote to designate who they think is a conspirator. The active player does not participate, so they're done, they cannot vote. But starting from the player on their left, so from this player, and proceeding clockwise, each player places their voting token next to a player of their choice, except their own, that they think they are the conspirator. So if everyone is going to have a chance to discuss, maybe even this guy can say, even though he was a conspirator, he can try to do his best, say this is a desert, so it's a mud, you know, once he hears the keyword, maybe he can realign himself or herself, and this is a part of nature, because desert is nature. And here, okay, then he identifies, he didn't have a clue before, but then he identifies, luckily, a tree trunk and says this is also in nature. Of course, the cards, as you can see, have different meanings and some kind of mixed and in-depth perspective most of the time, so this allows for a lot of funny situations and scenarios, like this one here. So everyone will start voting. So let's say this guy here says, no, you're definitely the conspirator, because both of those cards really match nature. Both of mine cards really match nature. I don't think that you are the conspirator, a detective, and I believe you are a conspirator. Therefore, they're placing their voting marker next to that player to indicate that they think I'm voting for you to be the conspirator. And maybe this guy also follows and agrees. And of course, this one will try to vote something else, especially now we know the conclusion, it's 2-1, but let's say he wasn't the last in the row to vote, so he can create maybe some kind of misleading trend. Then we move to the fifth phase, which is scoring. Once every player has voted, we reveal all notebooks, so we flip them. Those two notebooks revealed will say nature, this one will show a blank, so we know that this person is a conspirator. Each detective who placed his voting token on the conspirator player marker, they score 3 victory points. So both the purple player and the green player, we get 3 victory points, and they tend to keep them face down. If there is 0 or 1 token on the conspirator, then the conspirator instead would get 5 victory points. So if they haven't voted for him, they wouldn't get 3, and then the conspirator would get a 5er, which is quite a lot of victory points. But let's say, going back to this, that they have voted. And if there are 2, so if there is 0 or 1 marker on the conspirator player marker, then the conspirator scores 4 victory points and the active player scores 4 victory points. Okay. If there are 2 or more tokens voted here, then the conspirator gets no victory points, and the same goes for the active player. Only the people who nailed him get 3 victory points. But if, let's say, because there are 2 or more, if only 1 voted for them, so let's say each of the other player voted each other, so there was a confusion or whatever, then in this scenario what happens is 0 or 1, then the conspirator receives 5 victory points, as I mentioned, and the active player receives 4. And this is the only scenario that the active player receives victory points. And again, then you can keep them face down respectively. So important thing here to mention is that there is a lot of confusion, and please keep the victory points face down. Once the scoring phase is complete, a new round begins. The active player passes the marker, which is the pencil, to the player on their left. We get back the voting tokens for the next round. And then the next thing that happens would be to discard those cards. Okay, we don't need them, we need empty slots for the new round. And of course, it is suggested that if you have a keyword on your notebook, to cross it out with a pencil so that there is no confusion. The new first active player will gather again notebooks -1 according to the number of players and start a new round. The game will continue and will end after each player has been active player, when we play 6, 7 or 8 players, or after each player has been twice an active player when we play less than 6 players. Then we reveal our victory point tokens. Remember, these are face down, so we reveal them. And we sum to get our final score. The player with the highest amount of EP wins, and if there is a tie, tied players with a greater amount of victory point tokens in total, numerical that is, not the sum of the numbers, how many they are, between the tied, wins the game. If still tied, all players share victory. It's worth saying that there are a couple of game variants for the game. You can have a thematic game. Before the first round, players choose a topic, and when the active player chooses a word on this turn, he must make sure that the word matches the topic that was decided at the beginning of the game. Topics can be very specific, like space opera, USA, protagonists, or general, like movies, countries, literature, depending on the level of difficulty you want to play with, and make sure that everyone agrees on the chosen topic. You can switch topic after a few rounds if you like, or try to play the whole game with the same topic. Another variant is the no discuss phase. To shift focus of the game, you can switch the discuss part of step 4, discuss and vote. And in that case, you start voting immediately after each player has played 2 cards, and the active player does not say the word out loud, and players do not explain their cards. So there you have it. This is how you play the Detective Club, an extremely fun, well-crafted, beautiful aesthetically, and with a great flow party game that I think stands out from the crowd, and everyone should at least check it out for once, if not have the game for their collection. So there you have it. This is Detective Club, and there's a big reason why there is a lot of hype and buzz around this title. One of the strong points of the game is that it can be explained very, very fast, and it has a very fast flow. The second portion that is really strong on this game is that it has a very, very interesting combination of keywords, of hidden roles and hidden information, because one person knows they are the imposter and they don't know the keyword, and the rest are detectives and they know the keyword, so they're trying to match their cards with what they think the imposters they think the keyword is, and not to shoot on their feet and give away their hidden role, which is a conspirator, because then everyone is going to vote for them. So tremendously fun, very easy to teach. I would say very highly manufactured. The quality is excellent. The art is amazing. I enjoyed the art so much. I really enjoy the art in this type of games. Again, Dixit Mysterium, and When I Dream, etc., which have a lot of things going on in the card and you have to pick up details, etc. But for this specific one, I think it's I would pick it up among the rest, just a personal favor opinion, because they're really, really, really nice, and they give you lots of opportunities to pick up things and try to show your case to your fellow players. Fast gameplay, nice design, lots of replayability, great quality production-wise, and above all the recipe ingredients that are needed for a successful and very, very enjoyable party game. There you have it, that's Detective Club.